for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. As far as applied economics goes, is Donald Trump, first of all, let me start with Donald Trump first. Is he getting this right?
President Donald Trump is not doing economics. He's pursuing a nationalist agenda. And when you are dealing with someone who is mixing up economics with a more strong nation approach, you have to be very cautious in how you respond to the fellow. Yeah, so far we've all been talking economics, but Donald Trump is not thinking economics. He's thinking of how he can leverage America's power and position to, first of all, restore some or maybe introduce some kind of fear of America. That is where he derives the satisfaction. It is not all about economic prospects. Because if it is economic prospects, no one will be imposing tariffs and seeking to move jobs into a production system where costs are higher, and at the end of the day, you are going to be paying more. But that is what he's saying, that by imposing taxes, American goods will become competitive. Companies will move back to the United States, produce there, and then employ American citizens. But the bottom line is that these companies are abroad in the first place because cost of production, labor cost, cost of regulation, and other things are much, much cheaper in other places, and the goods that end up in the United States are cheaper. So if you look at the economics within his thinking, there isn't much in there. If you look at the nationalism and then the right-wing agenda, that is more of what we see. So yes, I'm kind of worried about the way we are approaching it, thinking this is just purely economics. It is not.
Oh, okay. So for you as an economist, if you're doing it, if you're looking at it from a purely economist position, you're saying that it does not make sense.
Yes, no, it doesn't. It doesn't make sense because some of the goods is also imposing, the countries is imposing tax on certain goods to the United States that the United States cannot produce. Necessarily have to come from the countries of origin. You look at some of the textiles that we send, they are largely symbolic textiles, historical textiles, things that are more or less patent to Ghana. You look at some of the agricultural produce that we send, I don't see the United States producing them. So if we had a more coordinated response to this, especially the countries that export these things, you would notice that the U.S. will be at the receiving end. But as you rightly pointed out, Donald Trump knows that many of these countries haven't got a coordinated response, and some of them will come begging. And once he gives concessions to a few people who come on their knees, the rest are forced to either join or suffer the economic blowback. So that is the key challenge here, that we wouldn't have bothered, would have just transmitted these costs into the prices. Because anytime you impose a tariff, two things happen. The producer has to think of either absorbing the cost or passing it on to the consumer. In either of these cases, it is even the indirect implications that are here economically rather than just the direct cost or the direct implications of the tariffs. So as I sit here, I'm not worried about the 10%. I'm worried about what is happening to other countries, other alternative markets, other countries that would have to absorb their share of these tariffs and then readjust nationally. I'm more worried about what is happening in NATO as it's forcing Europe and the rest to increase their defense expenditure, and by so doing, cutting back on aid and other fundings that come to support developing countries. That would mean that that employment spectrum across civil society, across NGOs and others may fold up, and government has to find jobs for these people. So I'm more worried about the indirect implications than the 10% on Ghana. But let's be honest with ourselves. How did we get here? And that is the key challenge here. I've heard people talk about what government should do. I think that we got here because of our irresponsibility and our recklessness in dealing with American companies. And when we saw that when we started reading that a senator was urging President Donald Trump to use America's power to ensure that the arrears in excess of 250 million owed American companies are paid. We should have known that potentially we could be included in this tariffs and then do something. So the bottom line is we were reckless in not living up to our obligations as far as these companies are concerned. So as I said somewhere last year, the indebtedness of this country is its biggest problem, and we went where we shouldn't have gone. As we heard the American ambassador, they said we had to pay American companies their arrears in order to improve the business climate. That meant that the climate is poisoned, and it is because we didn't pay up. So the whole thing that this Ghana is facing is the making of our failure to live up to our obligations, and then borrowing and refusing to pay. So that is the bottom line here. As far as I'm concerned, responding to Donald Trump in equal measure is only going to worsen the matter. You look at the posturing. Once you respond, he takes it into a nationalist arena and thinking you are challenging Americans' power. He ignores economics and then escalates. So we want to ask ourselves, do we have to find a way of working within this 10%, or the bravado I'm hearing across the spectrum that we should also hit back? We want to ask ourselves, if we hit and Donald Trump takes it to 20-30%, what happens? So we need to adopt a more cautious approach and analyze what is going on, and then see how we can solve this diplomatically. As you said, there is no way of getting a unified response to this, either at ECOWAS level or at AU level. So if we are all going cap in hand begging for concessions, it's better we do otherwise. Not that we cannot respond, but sometimes it is better to approach the issues cautiously.
And I guess that's what the three ministers will attempt in this meeting with Virginia Palmer. The Minister for Foreign Affairs is taking the lead, trade, and then there's finance. Are those the ministers you expect to see in any of these discussions?
Yes, I expected to see the Minister of Finance and then also of Foreign Affairs in this. So once you have the two, any other addition to it is fine. I'm okay with it. I am preempting that it is going to be a discussion about how to tackle the arrears and then how to respond to President Donald Trump. Once you don't take an aggressive stand and you try to reason things out, I believe that we could get some concession in terms of either being taken off the list or getting the tariffs reduced. But the bottom line is, as I said, it is not the direct impact of the 10% that is going to affect Ghana. It is what happens to the other nations that Ghana has strong ties to. If you look at the list, most of our competitors in terms of what we are selling to the United States also are in the list there. So it's not like somebody's going to get competitive over Ghana. So at the end of the day, it's going to be producers transmitting this cost to the prices, and then American consumers and taxpayers pay more. If that happens, Donald Trump may, as some people are expecting, write checks to individuals based on the windfall revenue they are building out of these taxes. But as I said, it's a zero-sum game. It doesn't make economic sense. But Donald Trump is not doing economics.
I see. And let me conclude by asking about the businesses that will be confronted with dealing with these tariffs directly. For most businesses based in Ghana, if you look at the cedi dollar exchange rate, is it an advisable move to absorb, or do they just put it on it and hope that their customers in the US like their products so much so they continue to consume despite the increase in the prices?
As I said, there is no one-size-fits-all in this. It depends on the commodity in particular. For me, I think textiles and other artifacts that have some sentimental values attached to them, African Americans and people who are collectors view these things beyond outside the framework of economics. They can transmit their prices. For agricultural produce that we have strong competitors in Latin America and other countries that are also perishable, you have to look at the situation on the ground and then do your mathematics. So it is going to be a mixed bag. For some, will be able to absorb it and readjust accordingly. For some, there's going to be some economic implications affecting producers and then reducing our competitiveness. As I've said, if countries are talking, the government is doing the right thing by seeking to engage and not going with the populist talk that we should also impose taxes on American produce. We can't do that. But at the end of the day, what is going to happen? So, yes, you are right. Some goods will suffer, some will not.
Well, and I guess we would have a further conversation tomorrow because we're looking forward to the outcome of that meeting today. But thank you very much for speaking to us, Prof.
It's a pleasure always talking to you.
Yeah, Professor Michael Ayamga-Adongo says you cannot look at this from the perspective purely of economics. In fact, he says he thinks it's less of economics, more of nationalism, and more Trump seeking to consolidate, and is more about power. And that you need to look at it from those perspectives, because if you do an analysis of tariffs, and I tell you, I spent the whole of last week going through Michael Wolff. There are many other economists who spend time trying to, even within the US, there's huge criticism of what Trump is doing, because there are many economists who completely disagree with this move by Donald Trump, because he said it does not make economic sense. But it makes a lot of sense for Trump and the kind of rhetoric he's been pushing over the period. So really, he doesn't care about how Ghana feels about it, how Lesotho feels, how Burkina Faso feels. He really doesn't care about it. To him, he serves the interest which he has been, and the agenda he has been pushing all this while. And that's what is important for him. So you can complain and moan and do whatever you want. Donald Trump is not bothered, because it gives him that power of strength. He always wants to negotiate from a position of strength. So this move is to say, I'm imposing on you. What do you say? And I think China's response really took him by surprise. So there are many countries that can respond very strongly. Question is, can we? And how do we do that? SM.